Hey, what's going on out there? It's Wednesday, a little bit after 1 o'clock. Bill Horn's in the studio. How's it going, Bill?
It's going great, Bob. You know, we've been doing this for 6 months.
6 months, huh?
Yep, and we've had some impressive artists, musicians, and performers from all over South Jersey on the show. I think you got to admit, we've had some really good people.
Oh, yeah.
But we also know that many communities and towns in South Jersey and across the country are looking to the arts to improve their communities, both economically and culturally. And we also know that it's not an easy process, and that's one of the things we'll be discussing today. Our guests today are Elizabeth Terenik and Mark Barone. Elizabeth is the Director of Planning and Development for Atlantic City. She has held that job for over a year now, but she has over 20 years of professional planning experience, and she has also owned her own business. And Mark Barone, who is on the phone today, has been a successful artist for over 35 years. And in addition to his art career, Mark is the CEO of Art Smart Cities and a national award-winning consultant to cities across America, showing them how to use the arts to revitalize blighted neighborhoods, and is known for a successful creation and implementation of the Paducah Artists Relocation Program in Paducah, Kentucky. And since 2011, he and his partner, Marina Dervan, have been running an active dog, which we will talk about later on the show. I'm exhausted, man. That was a long...
Thanks for coming. We'll see you next Wednesday.
I hope Mark's still there. You still there, Mark?
I thought I heard snoring. You there? You snoring, Mark? You're part of the deal.
Yeah, I usually do these real short introductions, but I wanted to make sure I got all that in. We're going to start with Elizabeth, Mark. We'll be back to you in a second. We're going to start with Elizabeth. What is the role of a Director of Planning and Development?
First of all, I just want to say thank you to Bob and Bill for having me on the show today. It's a great opportunity to talk about the things that we're doing in Atlantic City. The Planning and Development Department has 3 divisions. We have the Engineering Division, Planning and Zoning, and Community Development. And basically, we oversee every aspect of development, and that could include economic development, housing, open space and recreation facilities, transportation, environmental preservation, and we've been especially focused lately on resilience from storms and flooding. So what we do is we adopt policies and recommend laws that encourage good development in the city and good developers in the city. And we do that through a master plan, and we've been very focused on that issue.
Well, you've been involved in this for a long time, and especially in other communities in Cape May County and other places. How have the unique challenges that are facing Atlantic City affected the way you approach this job?
That's a great question, because there are a lot of unique challenges, obviously, right now. The economic situation has clearly created a sense of urgency and an openness to change, realizing that we have to change our approach. And as someone that considers herself a change agent, it's really exciting to be in an environment where people are very open to change, from the mayor and council to even the employees within my department. And that has been really rewarding to be able to come forth with a lot of different ideas and changes that are received well. So that's one thing. I think that in the history of the development of the city, Atlantic City is unique because there hasn't been maybe as much public engagement as people would have liked. So I try and go beyond what is expected or normal for public involvement in any policies or laws or things that we are changing or projects that we're doing, because there just seems to be a lot of angst around development issues in the city. And third, I would say that there's really been a lot of planning in the city that has not come to, of projects that have not come to fruition. And I don't think I've ever seen that as much in any other community. And folks want to see action. They want to see shovels in the ground. They don't want to have more planning discussions or concept plans. They want to see things happen. And that's what my department and the employees that have been wonderful have been really focused on getting projects done.
Okay, Mark, speaking of change, in 2003, you were an artist living in the struggling town of Paducah, Kentucky. How did you get involved in the revitalization of that town?
Well, the revitalization came in the Lower Town area, and that was the oldest historical area in Paducah, and it had come in hard times, and all of these areas that get blighted and stigmatized because of the way they look and where they've gone. I mean, you're talking 40, 50 years of neglect, and usually it's with us anyway, it was city neglect. The inspection department wasn't doing their job. They weren't really overseeing anything. They weren't really doing any code enforcement at all for about 50, 60 years. And so the area down there was in a very blighted condition when we started, and that's the area that I lived. And so when I first started, I was just trying to get rental licensing ordinances passed, which was going to make the negligent landlords responsible for their property and actually get them up to some sort of standard and code where they were inhabitable. But as they were in such deplorable condition, and we had so many of them down there. It wasn't just like 5 or 6 in a 30-square block area. It was hundreds of them. And so that was what we were left with. And so when I went to the city to ask them to pass a rental licensing ordinance, the mayor looked at me and he said, well, where are you going to be when I'm taking heat on these ordinances? Mm-hmm. And I understood what he was saying. I said, well, I'll support you any way I can, which I did. And so as the inspection department started being proactive, and they started getting the police department to be proactive in that area, I knew that just was not enough to change that area around, which is why I told them, I said, there's another idea I have, which is if we set up an incentive package to lure artists here, I said, we're going to have to infuse this area with something, I said, because inspection and police are not going to turn this area around. I mean, we were going to have the same people down there doing the same thing. It was just going to be kind of masked over, and the city doesn't have the funds to keep inspection and police down there for 10, 20 years. It just wasn't going to happen. So they really needed to be proactive in trying to revitalize this area and infuse something into this area that was going to help it blossom.
So when did you become the CEO of Art Smart Cities, and what exactly is Art Smart Cities?
Art Smart Cities, we actually started doing consulting when I was working in the planning department, and Tom Barnett was the director of planning. They're the ones that hired me on. And so we were actually doing consulting when we were actually working on the Paducah project, which was, really news to me because we never got into this to do any kind of consulting. But because the project had such huge success in so many different areas, and so many cities were looking at us as how did we do this, that we started consulting then. And then after I left Paducah in 2006, I started doing consulting with cities to help them turn blighted areas around using the arts.
Elizabeth, how important is diversification to the future of Atlantic City, and how will the arts fit into that?
Mm-hmm. Clearly we have to diversify. Casinos have really monopolized the economy because they were just it was such a lucrative business. So there was really not much that could compete with that. And we have to look at a lot of different options, but we have to be careful not to spread ourselves too thin. But the role that the arts could have is to make it a more livable community for folks. It's a quality of life issue. And also the arts can certainly bring people. I think one of the things that Atlantic City has always done well and will continue to do well is to be a destination. And that could be for the restaurants. It could be a destination for the concerts and other events. Now we're seeing Ironman competition is coming there. There's been some really successful other competitions and races and things. And I think that's going to continue to grow. We also have Meet AC that's been doing great work in attracting new conventions. So I think the arts can be another reason for people to come in the city. And as the municipality continues to do its job, and Mark, you really hit on a lot of great issues regarding lack of investment, blighted areas, and how to change those areas. But one of the most important things that we can do to achieve, to reverse that blight is to bring people in that are, going to Dante Hall Theater or going to the Arts Garage or going to the ballet or the Holtzman Gallery, because having people on the street creates a more safe environment. So it just becomes another attraction for the city.
Well, Mark, how do communities create an environment that encourages artists to relocate and to participate? I mean, it's not as easy as it sounds.
No, I mean, it starts with the leadership of the community, which we had in Paducah, and it's very hard to find that people that are willing to not move on to the next thing within 6 months, to actually be committed to this is what we want our community to be, this is what we envision our community looking like, and this is what we want to attract. So you have to have that commitment from from the powers at the city, which is the commissioners and the mayor. The other thing is that you know, for me, honestly, when we started this project, if it wasn't housed at the city, it was really a non-starter. I don't think nonprofits can do this sort of thing. I think they have minimal impact at best because the city took the lead on this. We were the ones that were buying up property. We were the ones that were selling property through urban renewal. And the city was the one that was setting up all the incentives. And then our private partner was Paducah Bank, which was making loans for the artists that were coming in. So we had, you know, the community leaders and we had the city leaders on board doing this thing. And I think that's one of the reasons that we started getting a lot of people to not only come there but to stay there. And really one of the cornerstones was having ownership, because what we didn't want to create, which we already had down there, was more transient community. You know, we didn't want a bunch of developers in there that were just going to make more rental property. That didn't do us any good. We needed to start building people that wanted to live in this area and be a part of the solution. And the only way we could do that was for them to have ownership of these structures. It didn't do us any good for somebody to come in and say, hey, you know, I think we can make this into, you know, a bunch of live-work spaces, and then all of a sudden the money is going to another town because that's where the person or the developer lives, and it's not in your town. And so, you know, those were all things that were really important for the success of the project, and I think home ownership was very important. And then we were zoned commercial residential, so the artists didn't have to find a place to live, and then also a studio and gallery space. They could all have it all under one roof, and that area was already zoned that way, which was really important at the time too. Well, so it was really a combination of the, you know, the public and the private. You know, the only community bank that we had left, which was Paducah Bank, that partnered up, and we got this thing going.
Mark, we're going to need to take a break. Maybe we can talk about dogs sometime before you leave, all right? Mm-hmm. We're just going to hold on. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
South Jersey's News Talk, 1400 WOND.
This ArtC segment on Bob Burns in your afternoon is brought to you by Atlantic Care. Healthcare you can believe in. Visit atlanticcare.org for more information.
Bob Burns in your afternoon continues on News Talk 1400 WOND.
All right, we're back. We're with Bill Horn, Elizabeth Terenik, and Mark Barone, and we're talking about planning for artists, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah,
I'm going to go with that.
We only have a couple of minutes.
We have a couple of minutes, but Elizabeth, during the break, was talking about creating communities and, you know, an environment that artists can thrive in. So go ahead, Elizabeth. Tell us about that.
Well, Mark just mentioned about the zoning, and a lot of Atlantic City is actually zoned for mixed use, which allows for a commercial use on the ground floor and residential above. We love that because that creates eyes and ears on the street 24/7, and it allows for an artist to live and work in the same location. To see artists actually purchase properties in that type of a setting would be so ideal for the city, because then you have creativity and you have action and a lot going on. So the city would love to see that happen. But Mark also mentioned wanting, you know, creating an environment or wanting people to live in the area. And it's how do you attract people to want to live in the area? And that's what the city and the Planning and Development Department is 100% focused on. What are the conditions that will make people want to live, invest, work, open a business in Atlantic City? And so we're doing a lot of projects to that end: parks and playground projects, paving, park and playground projects, paving of the roads, drainage issues, and a lot of different infrastructure things. And at the same time, we're trying to make the development process much easier.
You know, it's funny, Elizabeth. I didn't know how important drainage was until I got elected.
Yes.
There's a pond out in front of my house every time it rained. I never thought much about it because it went away, you know. But I found out when I was on Township Committee it was really important. Yes. We're going to take our bottom of the hour news break for ABC Headline News, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes right after that. We're talking with Mark Barone, Elizabeth Terenik, and Bill Horns in the studio.
Bob Burns in your afternoon continues on News Talk 1400 WOND.
All right, we're back.
Hey, Mark, you still there?
Oh, there he is. Now he's there.
Still here.
Yeah,
okay, we got Mark back on. I know he's moving this week, so I want to make sure he's not packing some boxes in between. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, Mark, as we talked about on the phone the other day, was grants and their ability to sustain the arts. What's your opinion on that?
I haven't seen any that if you're doing a project for a city or something like that. I mean, it was really important for us to move these projects quickly, and we just never went after them because of all the constrictions on them, and there's very few grants out there that are really bricks and mortar grants anymore, and they take so long to maneuver, and then you have to have people that are going to administer them, so it takes up more people out of the planning department when we were doing it. So it was really a non-starter from us. We did our project with general fund money, which was very quick and easy for us. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to get us going, and as the project started getting more and more successful, we got more money out of the general fund, and we were borrowing from Peter to pay Paul most of the time, but with the incentives that we had set up, it worked for us. But we never went after it because it was just really, to me, it just took too many people away to administer a lot of those things, and it wasn't worth the effort as far as we were concerned.
Just real quick, I know you have one of the fears that I have, and that's called fear of committees.
Oh, God. Yeah, I do.
That's what they say. That's what a camel looks like.
One of these things.
We call it death by committee usually.
The committee got together to design a horse, and it came out to be a camel.
Yeah. But Elizabeth had something she wanted to interject. I saw her nodding her head while you were talking, Mark. So.
Oh yeah, well it's great that you have a planning background because you get all these concepts on how you're actually trying to change a community. So I really respect that. You were talking about wanting people to live in an area, and in Atlantic City we have some perception issues that we need to overcome. And artists are generally, according to a study that I read recently, this is a Zimmerman-Volk study that was done for Atlantic City in the downtown area and attracting people to live in the downtown. And they said that artists, along with other populations, are generally more risk oblivious to their surroundings or to be in a neighborhood that may not feel as comfortable. Once they do move into an area and you see the coffee house pop up and maybe a gallery or other artist-related commercial space, then the folks that are risk tolerant may move in. Now, these may be the younger couples, millennials, and of course the city would love to attract that population as well. And then it settles a little more, and then you move on to the folks that are risk aware, that are now comfortable in that neighborhood. So it's really a great start for us to try and attract artists into Atlantic City to live and work.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah.
Do artists go in for that?
Yeah, I think Elizabeth's exactly correct. I mean, the thing that we were in a far western Kentucky town. I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere. We were a couple hours from Nashville and about 3 hours from St. Louis and 5 from Chicago and all that. But we had to make the incentives so good that they could overlook that, and they could overlook the blight. And if the incentives weren't good enough, they weren't coming. And so we sold the houses to these artists for $1. If they wanted an empty lot to build on, that was $1 too. We paid $2,500 towards architectural services. We bought down their loans at the beginning of the project until the bank gave us a better interest rate, so we were buying down the interest rate for the artists. And then we were in the enterprise zone, which means all the materials were tax exempt. So we had a very good incentive package when we went there. And then artists like Elizabeth was saying, I mean, they can look at, I mean, if you try to get a bunch of accountants in a blighted area, good luck. But, artists will say, oh, boy, we could make this into this, we could make this into that. And, they're more enthusiastic about that, so it's much easier to get them. And plus, there's a bigger payoff if you do get them there because of the galleries, if it's zoned correctly, and the studios and working studios and all that. But, our incentive package had to be really good so we could overcome not only the blighted area we were trying to turn around, but, where we were located in the country, which was far western Kentucky.
What do you think, Elizabeth?
Sounds great. If he could do it, we could do it.
Is there any plans to expand? There's an arts district on Mississippi Avenue that's kind of been, the same two buildings have been there, and it's great. But do you know of any plans to expand on that?
Well, we're trying to do exactly what Mark's talking about, which is to attract. And the area has very affordable real estate right now. So it's an opportunity from that perspective. And you can have live work spaces there. So that's covered. But how do we now actually attract them in? And I really feel that has to be an artist's effort in a sense of trying to attract other artists, or I'm not sure. It sounds like some other big picture items like selling properties for $1 would certainly help. The city doesn't really own properties in that area right now, but as as funding sources come available, we can look into that. But we haven't gotten to that point yet.
I know that artists want to be around other good artists. Isn't that right, Mark?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that the hardest thing, and when they start going down that road in Atlantic City, they'll find out is that those first 8-10 artists are the hardest ones to get, and that's why ownership is so important, because you don't want to lose them. You spend so much time and effort to get them there and to put this thing together that you want them to be your cornerstones. And if they don't own something, if the project's moving a little slower than you really wanted and stuff like that, they just can't bail out, they become part of what you're trying to do, and they become part of spreading the word and part of the solution. So that's why ownership was so important to us. And the city, with our general fund money, because the area was so blighted and stigmatized, we could buy up empty lots for $1,500, and we were buying structures for about $15,000-$20,000. But the biggest mistake we ever made with that program, because we weren't sure if we could turn it around, because when you're starting something like this, especially when we did it back in 2000, no one had ever done it before. So, we were just kind of learning as we went. And so we should have bought up more properties at the beginning. The city should have bought up everything they could have bought up down there, but we didn't. And so $100,000 at the beginning of the project bought us, 5, 6, 8 properties. At the end of the project, we were lucky to get one property for $100,000 and in bad condition. So, the area just started taking off, and that was it. So that was the biggest mistake I think that we made, when we started the project.
But boy, what a success story. You changed the properties from, $1,500 to a developed property for $100,000.
Yeah, and when you really think about it, like a property that we sold, because the loan to value ratio was completely skewed at that time. So if we gave somebody a property for $1, if they put $100,000 or $150,000 into it, it was worth about $70. So you had to change that dynamic around there, and it really changed by year 5. I mean, if you put $150,000 into a project down there, it was worth $300 and something, and so. Wow. That's what we were really shooting for. And at the beginning, it was very hard to do that, because the loan to value was so backwards, on the neighborhood. But that was just kind of part of the deal. And so the bank took a big risk with us. Especially the first year. After that, the risk lessened. But the thing is that for us as the city, when we spent $20,000 on a property and we gave it to an artist for $1. And then they took the loan money that they got from the bank, which was, let's say it's $150,000. We got a property now that not only brings in tourism, but a property that's worth, in 3 years, $250,000, and we, the city, put $20,000 into it. So to us, that was a no-brainer. We were going to do that all day long. And in fact, the city in 5 years put in about $2.8 million. Our return from artist investment in that area was over $35 million. So it was really no-brainer stuff for us. We were looking at to give these properties for $1, but we went through a vetting process, and our main vetting process was that, the bank said yes, we would loan them this money to fix up that property, and we had to figure out what those numbers were. So the bank was saying we were comfortable loaning anywhere between 100 and 200, then we had to figure out, well, what was the artist comfortable taking a loan out for, and then we had to figure out what their discipline is, and then what structure to put them in, and was this going to work? And so those were all things we had to shuffle when we did it. But as far as the numbers were concerned, I mean, they were so skewed as far as in a positive way for the city to put $2.7 million into a project over 5 years and have a $35 million return was a no-brainer.
Hey, Mark, I promised Elizabeth I'd get her out in time for her daughter's confirmation. So, Elizabeth, was there anything you wanted to say before you go?
Well, I just want to say the point that Mark just made is really how this should be presented in general, which is it's really an investment in the city. So one of our biggest priorities right now is to increase the value of the properties in the city, right? We know that they're very, very depressed right now. To take $2.8 million of investment, turn it into $35 million. To take properties that are worth $1,500 to turn them into $150,000. So that increase in value is the bottom line that will make this appealing to people, other than the fact that you have artists, because that's not going to do it for everyone. So that's really interesting. That was, I'm sure a lot of work went into it, but that's great work.
Oh, yeah.
Great work.
I want to thank Elizabeth for stopping by. I really appreciate it, Elizabeth. I know you have a very busy schedule.
Thank you.
And Mark, we want to give you a few minutes to talk about an active dog, which I know is near and dear to your heart right now. So can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, an active dog, I painted 5,500 shelter animals, and these are all animals that never made it out of the shelter. And the reason for the number is that that's how many dogs that are killed daily in this country in our shelter system. And so, when my wife told me about the numbers and we started looking at them, I said, well, in order to change this dynamic, we have to do something that's really newsworthy. It was no different than Artist Relocation, having a city take the lead and painting 5,500 dogs. So we were looking at something that was going to have not only impact but garnish the media attention that was needed in order to help fix this problem and to create a platform, to get the conversation started. And then from those 5,500 paintings, we have done, prints and everything else, and 100% of those proceeds goes to helping the rescue groups that are on the front lines of saving these animals. And so we got started about 4 years ago. All 5,500 are painted, and now we're in the process of looking for a location for the museum. So
can you give us can you give us
journey.
the website for that, Mark, so people can find out more about it?
Yes, it's an activedog.org. Just think of an active God, except it's an activedog.org. And they can go there. They can look at some of the media. They can see the products that are available that we've made, and they're all beautiful products. And learn a little bit more about our organization and our nonprofit.
I did look at that. This is Bob, Mark. I did look at your website. Those pictures are just awesome. I love those dog pictures. They're great.
Yeah, it is.
It's been interesting, and the thing about it is that PBS is doing a documentary about the project, and I think that's going to be done next year. I think they still have some more filming to do for us, and so we've been covered all over the world. I mean, Japanese TV picked us up. I think that Japanese TV piece is on there. The only thing I understood was Mark's son, so that was it. But other than that, it was really interesting. We've been covered in Germany, Italy, India, South America, everywhere. So,
When you painted
it's been really an amazing project.
When you painted the picture of Oreo, what kind of ladder did you use?
You talk about the big dog.
Oh God! Yeah.
Wow, that dog is a monster.
Yeah, there's 11 of those. There's 11 8-foot by 8-foot paintings.
Wow,
so,
there's something.
That was one of them.
They're awesome. They're awesome.
That is amazing. Mark, I really want to thank you for stopping by today, man. It was great having you on the show, and hopefully we'll get to do this again sometime. And I have one piece of business I should have warned Lauren about. I am going to give away 2 free tickets to the third caller to the opening night performance of When You Have No Class at Dante Hall Theater. We had Mike Boyle and Bill Griggs on a few weeks ago. So our number is 927-1100, and you'll be able to pick up the tickets at will call. Okay?
All right, cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you being here. Bill, is that it?
Thank you. Yeah, anytime you want to have me back on, I'll be happy to do it.
All right.
Meet both of you.
Thanks, Mark. All right, we'll be back in just a couple minutes. 927-1100, or you want the tickets, you leave me that, and I can talk about it after the break, all right? We'll be back in a couple minutes.
News Talk 1400, WOND.
This ArtC segment on Bob Burns in your afternoon is brought to you by Atlantic Care. Healthcare you can believe in. Visit AtlanticCare.org for more information.